I stand upon the opinion that indie games are the future of the video game industry for at least the next few years, and everyone should dive in them with no exceptions. More and more games are getting recognized every single day, and many people say they are far better than almost any AAA game made in the recent years. And it's objectively true. I'm going to explain the reasons why indie games suddenly got so popular, and why you should go and play some of them if you still haven't. Trust my words, the world of indies offers way too much value for us not to get it. And after watching this video, you'd be left with no choice rather than go and explore this industry. So how did it happen that indie games, projects made by just a fraction of people in a team and with little to no budgets, managed to gain popularity and even stand above AAA games in terms of quality? We can't deny that tech-wise, big games are definitely superior. They have the most realistic graphics, recognizable and polished gameplay, engaging stories and huge open worlds, while indies tend to utilize the cheapest means possible, which means everything is much simpler and smaller in scale. But when it comes to games and pretty much everything in general, you don't always need every single option included in your creation. Indie games add as much stuff as they need, which is usually not a lot, and then the developers polish those components until they shine. I'm sure many of you will agree that the footage that I'm showing you right now doesn't lose to the big titles in terms of graphics. I mean, sure, they don't use the latest tech, ultra-realistic scans and textures, but who said that you need all that for a game to look great? As long as you set an interesting visual style and follow it, you'll probably end up looking better than some of the AAA games. Or even, come on, look at Minecraft. You cannot say that looks bad. This is gorgeous. And when it comes to other attributes like gameplay and story, and actually everything in general, there is one thing that the indies have, while AAAs mostly don't. That thing is soul. When it comes to big games made by big companies, you can be sure that a big part of the staff doesn't really care about what they are making. Some just work for the money like a regular job, someone could dislike how the project is going with all the publisher limitations and pressure, or maybe someone may not like the game at all. Sure, there are developers in those teams that actually enjoy and care about their work, but you wouldn't get games like Forspoken if everyone just cared about the project. And yes, there are, of course, actually good AAA games, for example GTA, and it surely has the souls put in its making, but it's a different kind of one. You can't compare something like Stardew Valley to, let's say, Assassin's Creed. Most ACs are well-made games and their devs certainly care about the project, otherwise it wouldn't be that big of a franchise. But it won't give you the same vibes as Stardew Valley. You just feel how every single element of an indie game has been worked through with utmost care, from pixel to pixel. And you have to remember that big games are made by big developer teams, where every single person gives a little piece of themselves to form a big united project, and those pieces don't always align the best way. For example, imagine some games where you like some feature of it and just hate some other one. But for indie games, it is either a very small team or even just one person who puts their whole soul into the game, and everything there just works in harmony. You feel that balance in everything, that every single piece of the game adds to each other in some way. You will never find an unfinished or unpolished part in an indie game, because their developers actually care about it. They sometimes give their whole energy just to make the project real. Besides the extreme dedication and care of the developers, indie games also have one huge advantage compared to AAAs, the thing that sets almost all indie games apart the big ones, that being freedom. Indie games have no publishers and stakeholders, all they have are ideas and personal interest, and they can add and make literally anything they want with no limitations on that part. You want to make a game about owning a sushi shop and diving? No one will tell you that you cannot do it. The thing with AAA is, 99% of them are made with money standing above everything else. You can't make a game if you can't prove that it will make a shit ton of money to the publishers. They just won't finance it. If you think about it, most of the mainstream games are pretty similar to each other. And there is an exact reason for that. You see, in the big video game industry, most games follow the same formula to appeal to as much people in the world as possible, thus make everyone buy it. That formula usually implies that you're a good guy fighting bad guys. The genre is action, often being third-person view. It can get mixed up with different stories and worlds, but generally, all the single-player games are somewhat following that formula. God of War, Spider-Man, Horizon Zero Dawn, Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption, they all can be described with that formula, except Cyberpunk being first-person view. That template has been tested for years and proved to be the most selling one, which means the publishers will only accept games that either follow that formula completely or don't go too far with innovation. Same goes for multiplayer titles, with most of them being PvP games with microtransactions. Due to that, as the years pass, those games start to get more and more boring, and it's not due to the storytelling getting worse or something like that, but just because people started getting fed up with the same gameplay loops and wanting something more than that. And that's where the indie games shined. They are so different from any big game, and at the same time they are so polished and well made that they just automatically become way more engaging than any other AAA title. Our brain loves exploring something new, and in video games, indie games fulfill those desires like nothing else. You can do passport control, you can unpack your belongings, you can be stranded in a post-apocalyptic world with no particular goals whatsoever, you can rally race in a top-down perspective, you can be stuck in some office building arguing the storyteller's narration. The possibilities in the indie game world are pretty much infinite. You can find any game to your liking as long as you keep looking. There is no chance you won't find at least one indie game where you love the idea and the implementation so much that you can't stop playing. Sure, not every indie offers something entirely new and innovative. For example, Hades has a pretty recognizable gameplay loop, but don't forget that 1. It is extremely polished and made with love, and 2. It still has a unique feature inside the gameplay loop, that being endless variations of the dialogue, where it's pretty much impossible to hear the same voice line more than once in dozens of hours. Perhaps some big RPG games have something similar, but you just know that when somewhat basic feature gets turned into the main one in indie games, it will be done so well that no AAA title can match it. And when it comes to freedom, it's not only about the main idea of the game, it's about pretty much everything in the title. Visual style, music, storytelling. Indie devs are free to do whatever they think fits their vision. How often do you see modern games with visuals that are not just driven by hyperrealism? It's one of the components of the mass appeal formula I talked about earlier, so you probably won't remember many examples. But indies, on the other hand, can have anything. Some choose making games with pixel art, some choose PS1 era graphics, some just choose simplistic low poly graphics. Even though there are probably thousands of indie games that utilize those types of visuals, they still all look different because everyone puts their own chef's touch to form a unique style. And it goes the same for every other element of the game. If you remember the old days of gaming, let's say the 2000s, the AAA industry in some capacity was what indie industry is now today. We still had innovative projects because the publishers still allowed for experiments, due to the ultimate money formula still not being fully formed. We had games like Portal, Dishonored and Mirror's Edge, which I have a video about by the way, check it out after this one. Those can be considered innovative and feel unique even today, because they actually were driven by ideas and creating something cool, rather than making big bucks. Now that the money printing machine has been invented in the industry, all we have left for innovations and actual care for the games are indies. But how do the devs make such great games with little to no financial support and sometimes even experience? The boring formula wasn't the only thing that modern times brought into the video game industry. Besides that, we now have endless tools and fairly big communities revolving around creating games. You have free game engines, some even offer no-code environments where you don't even need to know programming languages, you got pre-made asset libraries, you have many YouTube channels and other communities that make guides for creating games. Nowadays pretty much anyone can make their own game as long as they have the idea for it and the drive with dedication to finish it. Some games also decide to be open source, inviting anyone to contribute to it. For example, if you have some indie game that you like, there is a chance you can help out and perhaps localize the game to your native language, if that's something that the developers allow for. It won't be paid, but you can get the experience of working on projects in a team, you will be credited of course, and it's just a good feeling in general to contribute to something that you love. However, creating the game itself is not the only thing that the developers have to care about. There are many things besides financing that a publisher would actually provide. For example, licensing, distribution, marketing, quality assurance, connections, all of that the developers have to do and do it well for their game to succeed. And some parts of those can be big roadblocks. For example, Flappy Bird had issues with Nintendo because they thought some of the visuals highly resembled those from Super Mario. Accidental or not, that can happen to pretty much any developer at some point, and licensing is not the only thing to be aware of. Marketing is especially a big issue for some of the developers. If you go on Steam, you'll find hundreds of games that no one has ever heard about and probably no one ever will, but they exist. Most of them, of course, tend to be complete shit, but there are definitely many hidden gems in there that could be successful, but completely fail the marketing part. It may be easier to do nowadays with social medias like TikTok. Even I sometimes find great indie games just by a devlog video popping up or something like that, but it's still a challenge for people who'd love to focus on making the game rather than something like promoting it. Though having a community is very important for such projects, as it's the only chance for you to get any support. And if you're not building a community, who are you even making the game for? It's fairly common now for indie devs to have their own YouTube channels where they share the progress, Discord servers where they can discuss the game and any person can share opinions and propose ideas, TikTok pages, Twitter accounts, you name it. And it's a pretty exciting thing to have for fans fans too. In the days where big developers listen to pretty much no opinions from the public, having someone who actually cares about what people think and can engage with their player base is indeed refreshing. And there is some other thing you have to respect indie devs for. While we talked about how cool those games are and how they can beat the shit out of the AAA industry, we might forget one important factor. Almost all indie games are pretty big risks for every person fully involved in their making. Some people sacrifice their financial stability, social life and pretty much all the energy they have just to complete that one game. And for many it takes ages to do. Some take 3 years and other can take the whole 12. No one guarantees the devs any success. In fact, many would guarantee failure, yet people still don't stop doing what they love and bless the world with some of the best games ever created. And most developers won't abandon their game after publishing it, continuing to support and update it every once in a while. And if you remember the Steam example, where hundreds of games will remain forever unknown, you have to also understand that many people who made those also made the same sacrifices essentially for nothing, besides feeling proud for finishing some personal project. Now that the indie industry is on the rise, I hope that more developers will get their deserved recognition. They are trying to revive the innovation and progress in video games that many of us either knowingly or unknowingly need in our lives. Please try indie games at least once in a while, and support the developers in any way you can if you enjoy their creations. Don't stick only to the games you're used to like Call of Duty or League of Legends. Let yourself free from that AAA prison and explore. There is so much you can find for yourself that you will perhaps find more enjoyable than the mainstream games you usually play, that there is just no objective reason not to try something new. And if you do decide to try indie games, be ready that not every single one of them will be great. Remember, they are not made by the biggest and most experienced teams, and sometimes the freedom developers have here can lead to some very bad decisions too, but be assured that there's always a game that will be worth every unenjoyable game you've tried. That's the beauty of indies. For now, that's all I wanted to tell you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more of my stuff. I usually make video game essays, but can sometimes release something completely unrelated to that if I find it interesting. Haven't yet happened, but probably will. I also have a Discord server where we can engage. You'll find it in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.